Welcome back to the show. It's your girl Sarah right here on Relax Radio. And I'm very, very excited to be here because I do have a lot of fun and interesting things that I will be sharing with you, especially on this hour of it's not necessarily fun, but it's interesting that I will be sharing with you right here on Relax Radio. So you're tuned into the sunrise, and I'm very excited to be here because Relax Radio is all about the positives, it's about no negatives, but it's also most importantly about making you aware, about making sure that you are informed about everything that happens all around the world, especially here in the United Kingdom, but also all around the world as well. So make sure you stay tuned because I do have a lot of fun and interesting things to be sharing with you. And a lot of informative things as well, so make sure you stay tuned. But before I actually head into the conversation, before I head into making you aware about everything that happens, make sure you tune into or rather make sure you download the app, which is available on both the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. And make sure that you follow us on our socials, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok as well. And don't forget to WhatsApp us on 078 to share your thoughts, your experiences with me, and to share whatever it is that you have to share with me, regardless of whether it's your thoughts, your opinions, your experiences. Make sure you do that because I would absolutely love to hear about all of it. Okay. Now, right now, we will be talking about the epidemic of violence against women that has currently been found, especially in England and in Wales. And a lot of the violence against women, or there was in fact an increase in violence against women, especially during the Euro finals. And that is something that we need to talk about as well, because there is a lot of domestic violence that is in fact interrelated to sports. And it's not just here in the United Kingdom, it happens in Australia, it happens in USA closer to the NFL, and especially on the kickoff, or rather, when the matches of the NFL are being played, there is in fact a lot of domestic violence that takes place as well. So this is a conversation that we really, really need to have. This is a conversation that we need to focus on as well, because there is in fact an epidemic of violence against women underway in the United Kingdom. And obviously, when I say United Kingdom, it's both England and Wales as well. So domestic violence in the United Kingdom is in fact an epidemic because of the increasing rates of violence reported. And the thing is, even though there are so many rules and regulations in place, every day there are increasing rates of domestic violence right here in the United Kingdom, especially when it comes to violence against women. Now, especially during the Euro final, charities and organizations, non-governmental organizations, predicted an increase in domestic violence, right? Because when the national team plays, domestic violence in England increases by 26%. And if England loses, the figure is even higher because domestic violence surges by 38%. And the fact of the matter is, the correlation between domestic violence and sports is by no means confined to soccer, and nor is it confined to the United Kingdom, right? Because it happens all over the world, and obviously it is in fact a huge problem, because we need to start questioning, we need to start asking, why is it that why is it that men tend to get much, much more violent and much, much more abusive, especially during times of during sports? Why does that happen? Because we've seen so many other instances, we've seen so many other incidents as well, when men have gotten very abusive towards women, especially when it was something sporty, if it was something sport related. So why exactly does this happen? Is it toxic masculinity? Is it just that the fact that alcohol, there is a huge consumption of alcohol during sporting events? Is it the consumption of alcohol that in fact influences these people or exacerbates the situation? What exactly is it? So make sure you stay tuned, because you can find out about all of it, regardless of you can find out about all of it right here on Relax Radio. So if you have any thoughts, if you have any opinions on this, make sure to text me on 078 You can even call me and you can share your thoughts and opinions with me, because this is something that has been happening widely in the United Kingdom, and we saw how bad it got, just a few days back as well. So make sure you tell me what your thoughts are on this, because I want to hear about it as well. So, like I said, the sporting events do in fact increase the amount of domestic violence that happens within homes, within families, right? And for a group of women and their children, it will actually create a lot of fear when these events are announced and when they know one's coming up, right? Because I will be getting into that, but it's also because when they know these sporting events are coming, they anticipate it, right? That means they get ready and all of that, and that means that when they know it's coming up, they know that it's going to make things much worse for a lot of the people that are there, especially women and children, right here in the United Kingdom. So this month, the London School of Economics and Political Science actually released a paper into the prevalence of domestic abuse on game day. And after analyzing the frequency of incidents over 8 years in Manchester, it actually found out that spikes in violence were entirely driven by men abusing their partners, and that earlier kickoffs were in fact associated with more abuse. Now, we'll be talking about all of that, but before I actually head into that, I need to talk to you about how domestic violence has been happening here in the United Kingdom for a long time. And when we say violence against women, it includes a whole other bunch of things as well. It's not necessarily just it's not necessarily just domestic violence. It also includes a whole bunch of other things like like trafficking, like prostitution. It includes rather sexual abuse and so many other things. So when we're talking about violence against women, it's in fact a wide topic. There is a lot of discussion that we will be having about it, because it is something that we need to talk about. It is something that we need to make sure we talk about, and we need to try and reduce these as well. So, like I said, it was found that spikes in violence were entirely driven because of men, or rather by men abusing their partners, and that earlier kickoffs were in fact associated with most abuse. Now, the reason for this is games that are scheduled at midday or afternoon does in fact enable perpetrators to start drinking early and continue throughout the day, leading to a peak in domestic abuse by alcoholized perpetrators in the late evening, right? So basically when you have these matches or games that are scheduled in the middle of the day or in the afternoon, what that does is they have time to drink all the way from morning, right? And that means the more they drink, the more alcohol that is going to be in their system. And the already terrible conditions or relations that they have with their partners are, in fact, going to be exacerbated. Because this isn't the first time. And we know that research has found so many times that alcohol does in fact exacerbate violence, right? Alcohol, it doesn't directly cause violence, but it does in fact make you much more violent. And we know that a lot of people, when they get drunk, when they're under the influence of alcohol, they tend to get violent. So this is exactly what happens, right? When these games are there much earlier on in the day, what happens is it gives them enough time to start drinking from morning, and that means that they get abusive towards the children, they get abusive towards their partners and whatnot, right? And like I said, when it comes to violence against women, there is a whole multitude of things when it comes to how when it comes to violence against women, right? Because like I said, it's not just one thing. Violence against women includes domestic abuse, it includes domestic violence, it includes rape and sexual assault. It also includes female genital mutilation, honor based violence, forced marriage, trafficking, and prostitution. Okay, so there is a whole lot of things that is termed under violence against women. So we need to understand that when it comes to violence against women, when it comes to how much of gender based violence there is in society, it's not just one thing, it's a whole multitude of problems, right? Which means that some of the laws that are in place for certain um, for certain actions, for example, the laws that are in place for domestic violence might not necessarily be applicable in instances of rape and sexual assault, in instances of honor based violence, and even forced marriage, right? So when it comes to violence against women, like I said, it's a diverse thing. And when we're drafting these laws, when we're regularly or when we're implementing these laws and we're putting these laws in place, we need to make sure that it protects the victim. Because how many instances have we heard of when the victim actually complained, the victim tried to get help, it actually backfired for them, and most of them had to die, most of them passed away because of how abusive and because of how terrible their living conditions, their lives were. right? And it's really, really sad because in this day and age, especially because it's 2021, things are much more evolved. People are much more developed than they used to be. So why is it that violence against women still takes place? Why is it that women are still viewed like this? And why is there domestic violence and sexual violence against women so much in society? Now that's obviously a very important question that we have, right? Because the way we have evolved, the way we are introducing different things to our world, and the way we're becoming much, much more liberal and tolerant of everyone, well, then when it comes to women as well, that should be the case, right? They shouldn't have to be suffering anymore. They shouldn't have to be, or they shouldn't have to live in these households where they're constantly abused, where they have to go through a lot of pain, both physical and mental and emotional, because of all because of everything that happens, especially with regard to sporting events, right? So obviously, like I said, there is a lot of questions, there is a lot of doubts that we have as well, because no matter how much we address this problem, no matter how many laws are in place, the rates still keep rising, right? So then you have to start questioning yourself, or you have to start asking yourself, what exactly is wrong? What are we doing wrong, and why is this situation not getting any better? Why is it just getting much, much worse? And why is it such a huge problem here in the United Kingdom? So those are obviously questions that we all have, right? Now when it comes to the different types of violence against women, we obviously need to talk about rape and sexual assault as well, right? Now make sure you stay tuned, because we will be talking about all of these different things that are relevant to violence against women, all of these things that are considered violence against women, and we will be talking about statistics and comparing statistics right here in the United Kingdom, and why it's such a huge problem, right? And obviously, I have to remind you that a few months back, there was a disappearance of Sarah Everard, and there were so many other instances like that. So those are things that we will be discussing as well, because it is a huge problem. It is something that needs to be dealt with immediately. But right now, we're actually going to head into a small break, but make sure you stay tuned, because after that, we will be back to keep talking to you about this epidemic of violence, and we will be, we will be informing and making you more educated on this as well.
The valuations that you place on an asset are always behind you. It's always in hindsight. It's never in front of you. And that's one of the challenges, right? Because you're always valuing what happened yesterday, and what you need is what's going to happen tomorrow. What am I saving or investing for? Why am I doing it? When will I need the money? And how much money do I need? Yeah. So that's quite important, because when you're looking at your net worth, you got to start with saying, well, what do I want my net worth to be, so that there's a goal, and then work backwards. How do I get there? And if I can start with £50 or $50 a week, if I save that every week, and you can go online and use calculators online. I don't have to teach you the maths behind it, but you can say, okay, and if I get a 3% return, and I put this away for how long will it take to reach my goal? And that's called just this basic cash flow projection calculations. And it's what we use in financial planning all the time. What we say to clients is, we say, okay, what is your goal? What is your objective? Where do you want to go to? And we discuss that in a lot of detail and over most of the meeting. And then the rest of it is saying, okay, in your exact circumstances, with your risk profile, with how you feel about investments and pensions and taxes and where you are and who you work with, and your education level, or your lack of education, or how involved you want to be. There's a lot of variables that we take into account, and then we say, okay, here's a plan. You start like this, that's great. And then we review it all the time, and we say, okay, we need to increase it, we're on track, we're not, this is what is happening. Because remember, when you're dealing with assets, the valuations that you place on an asset are always behind you. It's always in hindsight. It's never in front of you. And that's one of the challenges, right? Because you're always valuing what happened yesterday, and what you need is what's going to happen tomorrow. So that's a struggle. Yeah. So there are strategies everywhere from £50 a week up to £100 million, and they're different. Right? they range differently from everyone, but it and from country to country. To be fair, different countries have different tax laws, so different vehicles. But from your point of view, at the sort of normal end, I'm not going to call it the low end because I'm in that boat as well. It's as tax efficient as you can get it. That's where you start. You use all the tax efficiencies and then you step up into different things.
Welcome back to the show. It's your girl Sarah right here on the Sunrise. And well, I'm very, very excited to be here because we're talking about a lot of interesting, we're talking about a huge problem that is currently there in the United Kingdom as well, right? And it's a huge problem because we saw how much domestic violence did in fact increase during the past few days, especially because of the matches and all those sporting events that were there as well. So we're talking about domestic violence, we're talking about violence against women and why it's an epidemic right here in the United Kingdom, which is an important question because no matter how many laws or regulations are in place, no matter how many years we have been combating this problem, we still see that domestic violence is in fact increasing at an alarming rate. So obviously it's an important conversation that we need to have, and it's an important conversation that we're having right now as well. So make sure you stay tuned to Relax Radio because we talk about everything that's important right here in the United Kingdom, but also all around the world as well. We want to make sure that you're informed, we want to make sure that you're aware about everything that happens, and because of that, obviously that's why we talk about all of these problems. That's why we're talking about domestic violence and violence against women, right? Now, like I said earlier, or rather before we get into the conversation, I also want to very quickly remind you that you can actually go follow us on our socials, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. You can always be a part of the show. All you need to do is just make sure you tune, make sure to download our app, which is available on the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. Make sure to download the app, and that way you can actually make sure that you are a part of the show. You can make sure that you're sharing your thoughts, your experiences with us by texting me on 078 as well. So make sure you do that. And to get back into the conversation, I said earlier that when it comes to violence against women, it includes a whole bunch of things, right? It's not just domestic violence, it includes sexual violence, includes rape and sexual assault, female genital mutilation, and so many different things like that, right? So we will be talking about all of this, especially because I said we will be comparing some of the statistics that are available right now with regard to different types of violence against women. So number one is in fact rape and sexual assaults. Now, 1 in 5 women have, in fact, experienced some form of sexual violence since the age of 16. Okay, and mind you, that's just 16. At 16 years old, at least 1 in 5 women have experienced some form of sexual violence since the age of 16. Okay, and approximately 85,000 women are raped, and over 400,000 women are sexually assaulted in England and Wales every year. Okay, that's just every year. Okay, so imagine if you were to count all of the women that were raped and sexually assaulted in the past few years, the numbers would be outrageous. It would be so huge, and it is alarming as well, right? Sexual violence is, in fact, even more prevalent for younger women, as 1 in 3 teenage girls have experienced some form of sexual violence from a partner. And 31% of young women who are aged 18 to 24 report having experienced sexual abuse in childhood, and 90% are abused by someone they know, and 60% are abused by other children or young people under 18. So, right now, we see one of the biggest problems we have, right? When it comes to abuse, when it comes to sexual abuse, sexual exploitation, it's not just older people who do it. There are even children, young kids, who are below the age of 18 that are involved in abuse, that are involved in rape, that is involved in sexual violence. And I don't know how to feel about that because they're children. You're considered an adult, you're considered rational when you're 18, right? That's why you get a lot of you get a lot of freedoms, and you get a lot of rights, not necessarily the rights, but you get to do a lot of things when you're 18, right? So imagine someone who's below the age of 18, someone who you don't really consider rational, being allowed to, or rather raping and being involved in sexual violence. Because I definitely don't know how to feel about that, because they're still small children. Okay, come on, if they're young people under the age of 18, that's just 16, 17 years old. And at that age, if you're abusing young women, if you're abusing girls while you're at that age, then obviously, your future is going to be much, much worse, right? Because when it comes to abuse, when it comes to sexual violence, that is a cycle that continues, right? Regardless of the fact that you did it when you were 16, it means that it will still continue. And the younger you are, the higher that means that you will keep on abusing people, that you will keep on abusing young women and young girls as well. So that is an alarming amount, and it's also completely, it's very disturbing to put it, right? And another thing that's important is that conviction rates for rape are in fact far lower than other crimes, and only 5.7% of reported rape cases end in a conviction for the perpetrator. And I think that just goes on to tell you something that is fundamentally wrong with our society, because we need to talk about this as well. Because when a woman gets raped, how many instances have you heard people saying, "Oh, what was she wearing? Why was she out at that time? Why did she, make eye contact with him?" Why is it that when a woman gets raped, that we always have victim blaming? Now, I was having this conversation in the morning as well with one of my colleagues, and I was telling her, it's so unfair that when we get raped, when things happen to women, we're the ones who are blamed for it. Like, why is it that you continuously keep blaming women for things that they aren't even, accountable? Why are we holding women accountable for the crimes of someone else, especially in this instance, since we're talking about men raping women and boys raping girls? Why is it that we hold the woman accountable for something wrong that was done by the man? And it makes absolutely no sense to me, because I've heard so many conversations out there about how the woman is the victim, how it's a woman's fault, and how she should have done something about herself. But the truth of the matter is, you should be allowed to walk out on the road at night. You should be allowed to walk on the road at any time of the day without fearing for your life, without feeling threatened, without feeling that you're not going to get any protection when you're walking out on the road. And believe me, it's not just normal girls who feel this way, right? There was even a police officer who was killed because she was walking out at night with her dog. And I don't understand how it is, our fault that if things like rape happens to us, if something bad happens to us, that it's our fault. It just does not sit right with me, and it does not make any sense to me. And if you want to contest me on that, go ahead, because I want to really know why a lot of people think it's okay to victim blame, and why a lot of people think it's okay to make people go through that whole experience all over again. Okay, because it just does not make any sense at all. And another thing that we see happening is when it comes to, when it comes to conviction, when it comes to these rape cases being convicted, it takes so much of time for this thing to happen, right? So imagine if this happened to you, you have to keep reliving this, you have to keep, you know um you have to keep going through that until you get the conviction. And even then, there is PTSD that is there after you get raped, right? And we've heard, we've read so many stories of women who got raped and who couldn't, they couldn't get back to normal. Like, even the fact that someone touched them would traumatize them, because it's traumatizing, right? I mean, come on, if you've been raped, if you had to go through such a terrible experience, then you're going to be traumatized. And given the fact that our system essentially caters to, the perpetrator and not necessarily the victim, and the victim is doesn't necessarily get the justice they deserve, there is something fundamentally wrong with the way we address these issues, right? And I know I'm not the only one that feels that way. I know there are so many women out there that feel that way. And that's why when Sarah Evra disappeared, and when other things have, when other in situations happen here in the United Kingdom, when other women went missing, there was this whole rise in the movement of, you know basically people wanted to feel, to feel some sense of comfort. They didn't want to feel like they were being threatened. They didn't want to feel like that going out on the road at night was in fact a threat to their life, and no one wants to feel that way, and that is a terrible thing that people do. You need to stop victim blaming, and it's not helping anyone. It's not helping you either, and it's not helping the victim either. Okay, now let's talk about female genital mutilation, which is another way in which the violence against women happens. So if you don't know what female genital mutilation is, it is when it's pretty much what the name of it is. It's pretty much when the genitals are mutilated of women, because of certain customs, because of certain traditions and whatnot. Now, over 60,000 girls under the age of 15 are in fact at high risk from or high risk of female genital mutilation every year in England and Wales. That's 60,000 girls for a year. Okay, and over 137,000 women in England and Wales are already living with the consequences of FGM. If you don't know, if you don't know what FGM is, if you want to know more, if you want to make yourself aware, if you want to educate yourself, there's a wonderful book that you could read. It's called Desert Fluffer, and it basically talks about female genital mutilation, why it happens, and the complications of it. If you don't know what the complications are, there are so many different complications, especially when it comes to female genital mutilation. Okay, because it can result in risks and complications during childbirth. It can result in a lot of pain, bleeding, and wounds in your genitalia, and there are so many different effects of it. So if you don't know about it, then now is the time to actually go and learn about it, because it doesn't hurt for you to be educated, it doesn't hurt for you to be informed, and definitely it doesn't hurt for you to help women who are who are going through domestic violence and violence against women. And speaking of domestic violence, I've always heard this thought, or heard this narrative, that when women talk about feminism, when we're talking about equality, there's always that one idiot who always asks that question. Oh, well, since we're talking about feminism, since we're talking about equality, does that mean I can hit a woman back? What is the logic in that? What is the logic in that? Like, really, I don't understand, because there's already so many women out there who are experiencing domestic violence, and your question when it comes to feminism is, oh, does this mean I can hit a woman back? No one deserves to be hit. Okay, that's as simple as it is. No one deserves to be hit that way. So that's also another very annoying narrative that a lot of people bring up, that I get very annoyed about. So, going back to female genital mutilation, that in fact happens a lot, as much as 137,000 women in England and Wales are in fact already living with the consequences of female genital mutilation. Now, the Female Genital Mutilation Act, which was of 2003, actually made it an offense for female genital mutilation to be carried out anywhere on UK nationals or permanent residents. And we'll also talk about honor based violence and forced marriages, because when it comes to honor based violence, the vast majority of forced marriages are young people between ages 70 to 25, and 82% of them are in fact female. And something else we definitely need to talk about is trafficking and prostitution, right? The UK is, in fact, a significant site of international and internal child trafficking, and the vast majority of trafficked children in UK are, in fact, aged 14 to 17. And many of these girls are, in fact, trafficked for sexual abuse and exploitation. And the average age that women become involved being just 12 years old, okay? And that's just women as young as girls, basically, as young as 12 years old, being exploited, being trafficked. And 3 out of 4 women um, in prostitution become involved aged 21 or younger, and 1 in 2 aged 18 or younger. And that's just very disturbing statistics as well. And in terms of this domestic violence, it accounts for 16% of all violent crime, and will affect 1 in 4 women in their lifetime. We really need to do something about this, because this crime does in fact have more repeat victims than any other crime. And on average, 2 women in England and Wales are killed every week by a current or former male partner, and 1 in 5 women in Northern Ireland has experienced domestic violence. So it just does not make any sense to me how we are not doing anything about this. Like, I understand there's laws and rules and regulations, but why are women still being targeted? Why are women still, you know why do women still have to go through all of this, especially when there are so much flaws and regulations in place to supposedly help them, right? I have so many questions about it. So make sure you stay tuned, because we will continue talking about it. It is in fact an important conversation that we need to talk about as well. But until then, make sure you stay tuned, because we're going to head into a small break. Welcome back to the show. It's your girl Sarah right here on the Sunrise. Now, I'm very, very excited to be here because we're having a very important conversation about domestic violence. We're talking about abuse. We're talking about sexual exploitation. We're talking about violence against women. To put it very, very simply, and it's an important conversation because we're talking about how a lot of women in the United Kingdom are in fact affected by it. How so many women out there are experiencing it, and they're experiencing it at increasingly alarming rates, right? So obviously that's why we're having this conversation, and you're tuned into the Sunrise with me, Sarah, and I will be keeping you company all the way until 9 a.m. Okay, so make sure you stay tuned because I have so many different interesting things to share with you as well. And like I said, if you want to get in touch with me, if you want to share your thoughts, your opinions on this, well, make sure you text me on 07852473473, and make sure you go follow us on our socials, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And don't forget to download our app, which is available on both the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. So make sure you do that as well, because you can get in touch with me. You can share your thoughts and opinions with me, because this is an important conversation, right? And it's not just relevant to me, it's relevant to all of us, because we all have been in situations, or we all know people that have been abused, that have gone through abuse, that have gone through harassment, and that have been targeted in some way or form. And we need to look out for them. We need to make sure that everyone has a safe space to live in, right? And that's what any government owes the citizens, right? To make sure that there is a safe space for people to live in, to make sure there is a safe space for people to talk about the problems, to survive, to live, right? We have to have that safety when we live in a specific country. And the truth of the matter is, right now, women don't really have all that safety. Women can't step out into the road without feeling, like their life is being threatened. Women can't go anywhere or do anything without getting blamed if something happens to them. And that is the sad truth. That is just the sad reality of it. So we have to talk about this. We have to make more people aware of how terrible the situation is, not just for us, but for a lot of women out there as well, right? So obviously, that's why we are having this conversation. Now, to get back into the conversation, I was just telling you about the different types of violence, different types of things that are done, especially when it comes to violence against women. Now, women and girls are in fact being subjected to an epidemic of violence that requires a radical and bold shift in how authorities in England and Wales tackle crimes that disproportionately affect female victims. Now, obviously, we didn't need anyone to tell us this. We knew this all along. We need to change the way in which we need to change the way in which people talk about these problems, the way in which these problems are handled, right? Because to be quite honest, they're doing a very bad job at it. It's terrible. No one is getting justice. No one is feeling safe. And it's 2021. We can't have people fearing their lives. We can't have women fearing their lives, fearing that the moment they step out onto the road that something bad is going to happen. Because how many times have you or I, especially me, when I'm going out to jog at night, if I have to, I always dress like a man so nothing will happen to me. And that's just my story. How many women, how many stories are there out there who have similar situations like this, who do put themselves in similar situations, who dress up like men just to avoid themselves from being targeted, just to avoid themselves from being harassed while they're out on the road. Now, in an interim report by Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services, it actually calls for councils, schools, health and social care bodies, and all areas of the criminal justice system to, in fact, work together to address the problem, as the police itself cannot solve this alone. And that's important because when it comes to sexual violence, when it comes to sexual assault, when it comes to domestic violence or violence against women, education is very, very important. How many times have we had these narratives? How many times have we heard people in schools themselves telling or reinforcing these narratives that, oh, women are like this, women are like that, women, it's always women's fault. How many times have we heard that traditionally patriarchal narrative? We've heard it so many times, right? So obviously then we need to make sure that we don't keep continuing this narrative. We have to combat this narrative because people, or other, in this instance, women who get raped aren't at fault for getting raped. It's not like they ask themselves to be raped, right? Obviously that's not the case. So because it's not the case, because that is how society lives and that is how victim blaming happens, we need to change the narratives around these problems, right? And in March, the inspectorate was in fact asked to inspect the effectiveness of police engagement with women and girls. And the truth of the matter is, sometimes you can't even trust the authorities, right? Sometimes the authorities who are supposed to protect you and keep you safe violate that trust, make life so much harder for you that you can't even trust the authorities. So, who do you run to? Who do you tell your story to? How do you get help? A number of recent cases involving violence against women and girls have raised the profile of such offending, including the death of obviously the 33-year-old Sarah Everard and that of Julia James, who's actually a police community support officer in Kent, who was allegedly killed while out walking her dog, right? And also the murders of Sister Bibba Henry and Nicole Smallman in a park in northwest London in June 2020. And those are very, very recent, and those are the ones that got attention. But there are so many cases out there. There are so many instances out there that women's, that their harassment, that their abuse, that their exploitation has not even been reported. That it hasn't even gotten attention because these things happen so often, right? And the truth of the matter is, we can't keep continuing to do this. We can't keep going on like this because there aren't going to be any women if we don't take care of people. Like, come on, the role of any government is to protect its people, is to protect the rights and the freedoms of its citizens. So why is it that women still have such a hard time with their rights and freedoms being protected? Why is it still like that? This is a question I have all the time, and no matter how many times I talk about it, no matter how many times I voice my thoughts and my anger at it, I express my anger at it, nothing gets solved. So what exactly do we do? Because we can talk about it, but the real change needs to come from governments. The real change needs to come from justice systems, from police officers, from schools, where they actually collectively decide to change the narrative that exists, to change the way these problems are viewed in society. Now, among the inspectorate's recommendations was in fact a call for for an immediate or unequivocal commitment that the response to violence against women and girls is an absolute priority for government policing, and even the criminal justice system and public sector partnerships backed up by funding. This needs to be made a absolute priority, and it's quite annoying that you're beginning to realize this now after so many women have disappeared and died and gotten raped and exploited. But it is an absolute priority, and it has been an absolute priority for a while now. Okay, so within this, the inspectorate, in fact, recommends that the Home Office and other government departments should consider proposing a statutory duty on partner agencies to, in fact, collectively take action to prevent harm caused by violence against women and girls. Okay, so these are just recommendations, and I'm hoping and praying that they will actually, do these things instead of just publishing reports every few weeks and saying, oh, it's a big problem, but not really doing anything about it, right? Now, the police should, in fact, make the pursuit of adult perpetrators of violence against women and girls and the disruption of such offenses a national priority. And this was actually said by inspectors, and structures and funding should also be put into place to make sure victims receive tailored and consistent support, right? And the truth of the matter is, sometimes when things like this happen, they get someone ends up in jail, and that's it. There is no tailored and consistent support that victims get. And sometimes the fact of the matter is, sometimes the trauma isn't even prioritized because apparently we have bigger problems to worry about, so we don't prioritize the fact that there are so many women out there who are suffering, who are scared to step out, who are scared to live their life because they could die, because something could just happen to them. And that is what it is. Now, her majesty's inspector of constabulary, who is Zoe Billingham, said that we're living during a national epidemic of violence against women and girls, and the prevalence and range of offending and harm is stark and shocking. Okay, and you know what, I agree with her. It is stark, it's shocking, but it also means that we're not taking enough steps. We're not doing everything we should be doing to make the change. We're not doing anything at all to make sure that we are making the situation better for all the other women and girls in England, right? Because we need to understand that, okay, women have died at the hands of violence, women have died at the hands of assault, exploitation, trafficking, and whatnot. But we are still responsible because we have still let these things continue. We still to this day have so many women, have so many young girls who we're supposed to be protecting, being exploited, being involved in the, they're exploited, and they're in these situations that they find it very, very hard to get out of. So then it's not actually their fault. It's not their fault to begin with, because coercion, exploitation, it happens differently. It's manipulation. You feel threatened and you have no choice. Sometimes there is, like, the reason that most people continue doing some of those, continue, in prostitution, or they continue to be involved in all the abuse that they go through and whatnot, is because sometimes they don't have a choice. They have absolutely no choice to break free, and they have no choice to, because sometimes you just don't have any other alternatives. So because you don't have a choice, because you don't have any way to actually break free of it, that is in fact a big problem that is currently there in the United Kingdom. Now, make sure you stay tuned, because right now we're actually going to head into a small break, but after that we will be back in a few minutes to keep talking, or rather to keep continuing this conversation that is very, very important.
And it gives them something to look at, and it makes them laugh. It makes them laugh. So that's why I do it.
Oh, and it could be a really good pickup line as well. Ladies who ask, "Hey, excuse me, so why are you wearing something so colorful?" I mean, hey, you can you can always have something up on your sleeve. I mean, got me thinking. You want to stand out. Why do you want to stand out though so much, especially with these kind of shirts when you're riding? There must be a purpose behind it, right?
Well, when you say a purpose, Nick, what I do, I wear the shirts mainly, one, because they're nice and bright, so they make me visible, especially if I'm riding on the road.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, that's very important, right? Because you want cars, yeah.
Very important. And also, like, people see me in like calves, and perhaps I shouldn't be saying this on here, I suppose, but in the bar afterwards.
All right.
And it gives them something to look at, and it makes them laugh. It makes them laugh, so that's why I do it.
Oh, and it could be a really good pickup line as well. Girls, ladies who ask, "Hey, excuse me, so why are you wearing something so colorful?" I mean, hey, you can always have something up on your sleeve. I mean, you look like a guy who would do.
You know me too well. You know me too well, Nick.
Welcome back to the show. It's your girl Sarah right here on Relax Radio. You're tuned into the sunrise, and it is in fact the final few minutes of this show. But don't worry, because I am keeping you informed, and I'm keeping you, or rather, I'm keeping you updated about the epidemic of violence that is currently happening. In England and Wales, especially with regard to women, right? Now, that's what we're talking about. And if you want to share your thoughts, if you want to share your opinions on this very important conversation, and if you feel like there is something more that needs to be done, that there's definitely something lacking, make sure you text me, because all you need to do is just text me on 078 or you can even call me up on the same number and get in touch with me and share your thoughts and what exactly needs to be changed around here, okay? So make sure you do that, because I would absolutely love to hear about it. I would love to share your thoughts and your opinions with everyone else who's listening in as well, okay? So make sure you do that. But also, I want to very quickly remind you that you can, in fact, go follow us on our socials, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. That way, you can actually make sure that you are a part of this conversation and make sure that you are aware and that you know about everything that happens, or rather, that you're or aware of everything that happens right here in the United Kingdom. And also, don't forget to go download our app, which is available on both the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store, and that will help you be much, much more aware about everything that happens, and will also help you join this conversation, be a part of this conversation anytime you want as well. So make sure you do that. But right now, let's actually get back into the conversation. So like I said earlier, I was just telling you about how her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary, Zoe Billingham, said that we need to take steps, that it's important and that it should be prioritized, right? Now, it's very clear, or we're clear, that the police have made great progress over the last decade over backdrop against rather a backdrop of greater demand, and we want forces to maintain this momentum and build on these improvements, right? Obviously, yeah, in when you consider some of the things that have happened in the past and the way in which they've responded, things have definitely got much better. But the thing is, it's not enough. It's definitely not enough. We need more of it, and we need it immediately, and not just in a few more months, in a few more weeks, but right now, because this epidemic of violence has gotten very, very bad, right? So we need to make that change, and we need it right now, right? And there is still this evidence of inconsistent support for victims and low prosecution rates, which is again something that needs to be changed. Come on, it shouldn't be so hard for you to prosecute someone that has been a perpetrator and that has felt someone feel so unsafe. I mean, come on, that's literally why the legal system exists, right? To perpetrate, or rather to penalize people who are the perpetrators of crimes that make people question the social contract that is in place in society, right? So why do we still have such low prosecution rates? Why is there still inconsistent support for these victims? And offending against women and girls is in fact deep rooted and pervasive in our society, right? Urgent action needs to be taken, and it needs to the urgent action that we take needs to actually uproot and address this, and police cannot in fact solve this alone, right? And we understand that, we get that the police themselves cannot solve it alone, but this also means that people, or rather the government, all these other institutions, need to start prioritizing the fact that women need to be prioritized, that our problems are just equal to all the other problems in the world. In fact, they're much, much worse, and that we want justice now. We want it right now, right? And there's also, there must also be a seamless approach to prevent and tackling violence against women and girls across the whole system. And that obviously includes education, it includes local authorities, health, social care, and those from across the criminal justice system, with all agencies working together. So it's important to understand that the only way we can get through this problem, the only way we can solve this problem at a much faster, much effective rate, is actually if all of these things come together and they decide, look, we have to do something about it. We need to make that change right now, right? And among shocking statistics that are highlighted in the report are the crime survey for England and Wales, and that estimates 1.6 million women experiencing domestic abuse in the 12 months from March 2020, or rather to March 2020, as well as 153,136 rape and other sexual offenses that were recorded by the police, in which the victim was female 84% of the cases. Okay, and I don't think I need to tell you anything more about that, because those statistics themselves in fact show how bad the situation is in this country. Now, Sarah Jones, who's the shadow minister for policing and the fire service, said that the constabulary's report was very clear, and that there is in fact a crime epidemic against women and girls, and fundamental system-wide change is needed to address it. And this is damning, and it was also sadly predictable after devastating conservative cuts to policing, right? So, again, prioritize what exactly needs to change, what exactly needs to be done. And tackling violence against women and girls must, in fact, be a top priority in both legislation and in national and local government strategies, right? It's not just this instance, it's not just other instances as well. We need to make it a top priority, and we shouldn't keep waiting for more women to disappear, for more women to get raped, for more women to go through violence and whatnot, for us to start realizing, hey, you know what, we need to change the system, we need things to change, right? It's about time, because we have been waiting for that change to take place. We have been waiting for our government to actually care and finally do something to solve our problem, but clearly right now they're lagging very, very, they're lagging far behind, right? So they definitely need to make that change. They definitely need to make sure that they make our lives better, that they give us that sense of security and protection that everyone in society deserves. So that is an important conversation that we're having, and that really needs to be dealt with. Okay, so make sure you stay tuned, because I will be back in a few more minutes to talk to you about how two-thirds of couples actually start out as friends. But make sure you stay tuned, because I will be here to keep you company all the way until 9 a.m. But until then, I really, really hope you stay tuned, because, like I said, I do have a lot of interesting things to share with you. But right now, I'm actually gonna, be back in a few more minutes.